Hi, everyone. All right, let's deal head on with one of the most common misunderstandings of the middle so we can move the conversation forward to some more meaty conversations. The question is, isn't the middle always going to produce average decisions? Perhaps it's because we're using the word middle to describe the culture we're working to build that can lead people to that conclusion. But let me be clear, right up front. Average is not an acceptable outcome. We want the best decisions, full stop. Defending the middle isn't about watering things down. It's about the how we actually arrive at the best outcomes in a complex world. Remember, this discussion isn't about recommending a specific policy. Defending the middle is actually about a process to get to better decisions. I know, the word process sounds wonky, and sometimes it's even hard to avoid that, but let's give it a shot, and I'll try not to be too wonky. But before we get into the process, I also think it's important to highlight that when we try to address complex issues, we're often debating two different topics at once, many times without realizing it. Topic 1, what is the best decision? And topic 2, is the best for whom? When we blur those together, sometimes things get louder and less productive. The middle, though, is exactly where those two questions can be separated and addressed honestly. And yes, that process also benefits from voices beyond the middle, and how we listen to them is an important topic, but we don't actually have the time for that in this session, so we'll have to come back to that a little bit later. So, what is this process? Well, the big tent middle helps us wrestle complex decisions about who and how we should serve them by building a culture whereby we listen to the stories, use constructive debate, yes, across differences, then use nuance and smart compromise to figure out what actually works, all while building general alignment and consensus. Now, listening to myself, admittedly, it does sound wonky, so let's go at the simplest. At its simplest, it's about demanding a culture that allows us to choose and support leaders who are committed to this approach. It's that simple a process. And that process doesn't lead to average outcomes. I maintain it leads to clearer, more well-defined, and better supported outcomes. And it's not about splitting the differences. That would be average. What we're talking about instead is combining perspectives through real debate, listening to stories and disciplined engagement to arrive at the best possible solutions for the most people. And I'm sorry to disappoint many of us. To make this actually work, sometimes it means accepting that your preferred position doesn't win outright. Sometimes your side, and remember, whichever side that is, gives ground. But recall, what we have been maintaining is that when the process is fair, when stories are heard, respect engendered, and nuance isn't dismissed, that the compromises needed feel purposeful, not weak. More people support those decisions and work to implement them, especially when we know that this is not a once and done process. And in the end, having confidence that we will continue to work on our imperfect decisions to make them even better in the future is the key. That's why this middle is bold. It's not passive. It's not static. And it's not afraid of conviction. This middle is dynamic, action-oriented, and focused on outcomes. So don't let others define the middle as timid or unprincipled or that dreaded average word. The middle we're talking about is capable of real conviction, real progress, and better decisions. That's why it's so important to build out this community and why I'm subjecting myself to these public videos. In the next segment, let's take a quick pause for a moment on a summary of what we've tried to introduce before we get into more potentially contentious topics. So don't forget, if you think the middle deserves a seat at the table again, like, follow, share, and let's keep building this conversation together.